Well, hello there. Thank you for joining me on this late hour at the final day. I'm happy that all of you survived. And let's discuss why do we need all of this design theories? So, practical applications for fancy word. And we will go with the agenda, as usual. First, who am I outside of being a three-legged designer? Why this talk and why I think we need it. And of course, I come with an agenda. The theory of theory, because I heard you like theory, so I've got theory for it. And then we will go through my personal favorite kind of theoretical applications and in what situations we can use them. And finally, I will suggest a set of action points that you don't have to agree with and we can discuss them. But as always, this is a discussion piece, this is a beginning, this is not a set of checked solution because, those are games, and this is quite classical, that they catch fire in the most unexpected moments. Few words about me, the bragging slide, but it will put what we are going to discuss in a form of context. So, I'm Marta Fijak, I work in game dev in a way that they pay me for the last 10 years. I worked on every type of game. I worked on very successful indies like Rimworld, very successful double A's like Frostpunk, absolutely not successful personal indie projects like Deep, and of course, like all of us, on the plethora of cancelled projects. But outside of that experience part, I'm also an educator. So I teach on Warsaw Film School, I teach game design, but I also teach on American universities, been a guest lecturer in many different places, and I'm also, it's not an advertisement, a consultant and I make workshops. And this is important, why? Because this talk is kind of an answer for few things that I heard along the years when discussing design theory. So, why this talk? When talking about more agnostic frameworks, more fancy words, like, the decision spaces and ludonarrative dissonance and system rhetorics and all of those bubble talk like blockchain, right? I come with 3 or 4, this is a spoiler, main reactions. First, why do we need all of this theory? It makes our games uniform. It makes that every AAA plays the same and feels the same, and usually, is it a laser? Nope. Okay, so and usually the core example of that is the, how to say it politely, the bird shit to communicate ledges, right? We have it in Horizon Zero Dawn, we have it in Uncharted, we have it in any place that you need to climb. You just put some white paint, so to speak, and go. And let's be frank, this is not due to game design theory. We are going to discuss holistic, high-level frameworks. This is just one solution for a particular problem of communication, which can be solved in many different, more subtle ways. But as you can imagine, the uniformity does not come from the place of lack of better ideas or better approaches. It comes in big games, in my opinion, from mitigating risk, right? So we want to rely on things that already brought money when we want to bring more money. So that's the first against for theory, the uniformity. The second one is games are art. Why do I need those bollocks? To create, I just have to sit down and let my inner beast go. Yeah, it's called art brut. There was a whole direction in art, and it's art without craftsmanship. The idea of game design theory is something that allows you to create better. If your reason to design is to express yourself, or something for sure in the terms of the project, you need good craft to do it. And saying, I don't need craft, it's art, is just a quick, lazy way. And it brings us to, I hope, already dying notion about game design, that game design is ideas. Absolutely not. It is, first of all of us have ideas, and the whole team have ideas. And that one guy from the VFX team may have a lot better idea for what you are trying to do than you. Our role is to harvest all of those ideas and translate them to the language of the games. And that's the thing that is important. What is the language of the games? And this is what theory will tell us. And there's also my favorite, second favorite, argument. One is enough. I learned about core loop. I learned about player agency. What else do I need? And just to be frank, theory and theoretical background is not a substitute for experience. Those things won't work for you without experience. Those things get embedded in us by using them in practice. But relying on theory, we can do it a lot faster and get a lot better results. And I think, I don't know how it's for you, but for me, I do lectures because I hope I will play better games when I'm old, right? That's not funny, we're all getting old eventually. So, let's go to the theory of theory. So, what the hell do I mean when I talk about theory? We can divide different disciplines on a line, from art to science. This pickle up top there, this is a cell, you have to believe me, and it represents biology on this graph. And this is a hard science. And game design, somewhere along here. It's not the hardest one. Someone could even say it's the dirty word, a humanistic one, right? So the top one, the pickle one, is something that can be proven with scientific methods. You have an idea about how wolves behave, so you go out, you test it, you come out with a theory of an alpha man, and someone tests it again, and you find out it's bullshit, but it's all testable. With game design, but what we, oh God, ta-da! Thank you, and see you next year. And we're back online. Okay, so for game design, we can more think about frameworks, philosophies, paradigms of thinking, and conceptualization models. Because games, as beings that create experiences, are vastly complicated. And I'm even talking about that when you move away from the engineering part. The design of itself, it's a huge thing where everything touches everything and affects everything. As a form of foreshadowing, that's a nice term. It's a complex system. So, yeah, that's biology, that's game design, and just to be frank, and don't get any hate, there's game user research, right? The core part of game design or UX design, which is slightly closer to being a perfect pickle. But to get it out of the way, we are not going to touch that. We are going to talk about those frameworks, philosophies, and paradigms, and why the hell do we need them? because it sounds like a bunch of bollocks and woo, right? But we are in that spot not alone. The truth is there's a shit ton more. There's literature and philosophy, yada yada, right? But let's talk about movies, our favorite other medium that we steal from as much as we can, which is good, but not always. There are things that do not work. They have two types of systematic analysis and creation of philosophies and paradigms and thinking about movies, and are divided into separate categories. We've got film studies, and film studies are about games. No, they are not. Not yet, we will conquer them. Film studies are about movies in terms of culture. So what part of culture they are and how they shape culture, right? And then we can analyze them, we can formally analyze them, divide them in different ways. What is a movie? What is not a movie? What is a video essay? But there's also filmmaking, and filmmaking has its own theory. And there's a lot of that, because films, again, are a sum of many moving parts. But for all of those moving parts, there are different paradigms and ways of thinking. And just, again, we are not the pickle on the top, and movies are also not the pickle. Those are different ways. Not doing that way doesn't mean doing it wrong. But those actually are synthesized experiences. The Dogma 95 movie manifesto, which is more of a manifesto still, is an answer to what was happening and a philosophy of filmmaking, right, to get a certain effect. The story structures, they do not, every time they write a script, they are not like, with what should I start, end or the beginning? But if you were on Artur Ganszyniec's talk, he took you through different story structure. I here put the most hated one, the monomyth, because it has the biggest amount of steps, right? And it's fun to say. But outside of that, you've got the structures you can rely on. And what's even better, when you can, when you know them, you can subvert the expectations and don't use them. And it's the same with editing principles, with Mart 6 rule, etc., etc. And now the question is it the same with games? As you can imagine, and as we have this talk, yeah, right? We have game studies which are looking on games of part of culture. And this is the part where the discussion about what game is comes from. Because if I ask all of you, every single one of you, what defines a game, we will get many different answers. And in literature, there's also a shit ton of different definitions. But it doesn't make game studies not useful even for us as game makers, but kind of absorbing things that are there require more. Oh God, we are not going to make it good that we are the last lecture. It will take 3 hours. So we've got game studies, but also we've got different theories about game making. And those are those fancy words, right? The Sellers, loop, the uptones, decision spaces, the complex system. And of course, this is just for design nerds. But we actually rely on them quite strongly. We already have things that comes from holistic, agnostic analysis of games in our everyday communication. I hope that most of you know what's player agency, what's hero versus avatar, what's a flow state, why all of us are afraid of a snowball, what's a ludonarrative dissonance, which is actually a topic from game studies that we nicely assimilated. The core loop, which is like the basic that we teach students, and the barters player types, which were quite popular in the free-to-play era. And they have their uses, very strong one. The communication, they make it so much easier to say to our new designer, just make the flow state. We will discuss that in a moment. But what those texts gives us is the ability to quickly convey complex ideas. But there's a but. Because we kind of assimilated bits and pieces from different places, and those things became suddenly, trendy. Everyone needs to have an emergent behavior. Player agency is God, etc., etc. But they come in a context, and this context gets lost. So, looking at them, the hero versus avatar dichotomy is useful when we are doing an RPG, right? There's the Geralt, which is fully a hero. There's the Mass Effect, which is the weird shepherd in between. And there's the avatar, so the character that we make in World of Warcraft. But in not every game this is useful. If you are doing a roguelike, if you are doing a city builder, thinking in those terms doesn't make sense. The same with the snowball. We are afraid this is a dynamic coming from systems, right? So something promotes itself, and there's more, like a snowball, there's a drama. There's first a lot of more dynamics from which this came from, and second, it is a useful tool, for example, for failing the player faster. But we discussed it without context as, oh no, the horrible snowball is coming to get us. Flow state, it's the great theory, of the difficulty and satisfaction. And I don't know anyone, maybe you do, who is able to actually practically apply this kind of concept to the game. What is satisfaction and what is difficulty, and how do you check if there was flow? Those words are as good as what kind of tools they give you to your day-to-day development. They are not for, flexing that, a game is emergent behavior. That was a very popular term, the blockchain, in a way, of game dev on one moment, that the narrative is emergent, the gameplay is emergent, everything is emergent. Games are complex systems, and almost all of them have emergent behaviors, maybe outside of visual novels, more or less. And the thing is, we don't always want that, and emergent behaviors are very hard to control. And usually what we even do is do not define what we mean by that, right? The barters player type, very popular on some moment in free-to-play, which I have opinions on, and we can discuss them. But they were a staple in free-to-play. But that one actually gives you a more or less way to apply it, like being like, are we doing things for socializers? But still, not the only way. The holy grail of game design, the core loop of our game. Please tell me, probably not because I have to talk, how useful describing a core loop is in a point-and-click adventure game. What is the core loop there? How useful in analyzing and thinking about design of a horror game a core loop is. This is not a holy grail of every game. This is one of the tools that we need. And the ludonarrative dissonance, our favorite tension between the dynamic elements of narration and static elements of narration. Something. Sometimes we can want it. And also I agree what was said in the previous lecture, that it's not even a dissonance, because telling ourselves that there's tension between gameplay and narrative is something that hinders our ability to tell stories. Game tells stories with their wholeness, doesn't matter what we do. And this is just a situation where the two stories are different. But we will get there. So, we have all of those things, and we know them, but this is a very small and not exactly strong set of tools. And what is worse, when we come with this approach, yes, there's also player agency, like the Holy Grail. The player need to have decisions. But there's something very powerful narratively when you take away the option to decide from the player. So keeping it as this holy thing for the whole game may not be the best decision for your experience. But getting back, if we rely on them without the context, and this is our main way, then it's like with the hammer, right? If your only tool is a hammer, then every problem you will try to solve like it is a hammer solvable problem. And as we can imagine, that's not the best way to do it. Once again, we are not biology. There are things there that are set in stone. In here, it's just about accumulating more tools. The more tools we have, then from different perspectives, we can analyze our games. Because games are a little bit like this anecdote of blind monks and an elephant. If you have a set of blind monks and you put them around elephant, they will touch the elephant. And you will ask them, what is an elephant? And one will tell you, oh, it's a long thing with the hole in the end. The other will tell you, it's a form of a column. Another will tell you, it's a tail and the hole beneath, right? There's a lot of different things, but not the whole picture. And when we just rely on a subset and say, this is my theory, I will go with that, our elephant is that part with the tail in the hole. And by collecting, I don't know if you can hear me, because I think it runs away. Yeah, but by collecting many tools, we can build in our mind more and more coherent view of what a game is. Because what holistic, high-level agnostic theories gives us is also structure. Because, we collect those bits and pieces in different places, and we need a way to kind of structure the whole thing. And those theories also do that. So why more theory? Why am that nerd with the book being like, please? First, it's the matter of passing knowledge. If you had a great senior with years of experience and you told him, try to teach another, junior to put it in the right spot, it's not usually, but it happens. The outcome is, yeah, I just feel it, right? I do the thingy and it works. And the thing is, there's this experience got synthesized in this person in a way that they know unconsciously many, many things. More, when reading theory, they'll be like, yeah, I knew that. But without this kind of verbalization, it is hard to pass by. So by standing face to face with more and more theories, we can verbalize how our inner process of decision-making works, which is not easy, but it is required if we want to pass knowledge. What the big holistic theories gives us, theories in general, it's easier communication. It's those fancy words, it's easier to say fix the decision space because there is not enough predictability for the player to know what is happening and the decision space is collapsing, instead of talking and talking and talking and not being sure. But of course, this easier communication has a caveat, because now when we talk emergent behavior, every one of you have a different thing in their mind. So we will go there in the action point sections. It provides for older developers, not older, sorry, more experienced developers, a structure for knowledge accumulated over many, many years. We do things good, I hope. We get better at it. But it's sometimes in different places hard to communicate without structure. And those high-level approaches gives us this structure. It gives us more tools, right? Hammer, nail, and if we have more, like garlic, we can do different things with nails. And what is most cool about it, at least for me, that we can disagree with it. If we know the theory, then every time someone comes to us and be like, Butler's plier type says that we have to do X, Y, Z, we can discuss it and show different things. We have a way to discuss with this one theory kind of persona. So, as we are, let's go from some frameworks, like high-level frameworks that I personally use to analyze games and to communicate them. But of course, remember that your approach, your experience, and your philosophy may be different. This is just to show you how I apply them in everyday work and kind of to suggest to look for your own, right? So for me, there are a few points. First, the decision density. So when it comes to decision density, I rely on two approaches. I rely on Michael Seller's loops, coming from the book Advanced Game Design System Thinking, that conceptualize this elephant of a game, right, from one side, as a set of decisions happening on different time intervals. So we got the action feedback, very quick, the short term, under a minute, more or less, the long term, longer, and the emotional and the cultural, which are more complex. And I'm not here to sell you on that. I'm just saying this is a way of conceptualizing the whole game from one perspective. And having that connected with the learning theory, the cognitive load theory, which kind of divides what things eat up people's attention. This is not from games, the second one. It allows us to give us tools and questions to ask when we see problems in the form of players are feeling overwhelmed, players are feeling underwhelmed by the experience. Players do not learn from the tutorial, because why that's happening? As usual, there's many different sides to everything, and using methodically, that thing kind of shaves off one layer. If I'm sure that it's okay with the upper one and okay with the lower one, then we have some kind of weird, different problems. And of course, the cognitive load theory for UX in general, not overwhelming, not underwhelming, it's always important. So questions that comes from those places are like, what are the decisions, sizes of decisions on different time intervals? Because this is an agnostic theory. This is a game agnostic theory. So different games will rely on different subsets of those loops. Not every game will have everything. But when you feel it want to be more actiony or more something else, or you want to add more meta. But when we discuss it through this lens, it's easier to pinpoint what we are and where our hardest decisions and more often decisions are. And of course, we are talking on the lowest loop, decisions like exploration and movement, like very small decisions. So, what are the different intervals? Why is the an example would be, imagine playing Civilization game, but real time, right? The size of decisions, but on very short interval. And the second one is what kind of cognitive load is present in different stages of the game. Because it's cool to overwhelm player, and it's cool to show them like, woo, explosions, and it's great, but not maybe when there's the tutorial, right? Or maybe I don't need that flying particle dragon when I'm trying to learn the player to read. And looking from those perspectives, because there's also the element of recalling information in there, allows us to look on tutorials from a learning perspective and rely on experiences of teachers. Next is, my microphone is moving and I think you cannot hear me from time to time. So, anticipatory play. This is one of my favorite theories and favorite approaches to teaching game design, because a lot of those things we know when we get more experience, we know them instinctively. This comes from the Aesthetic of Play book by Brian Upton, which defines the game as a free movement in a system of constraints, and points us toward the idea that engagement comes from anticipatory play. The idea here is that when I play, I think about my next moves. Connected with the seller's theory, sometimes it is conscious, sometimes it is unconscious. But he provides us with a set of heuristics, so intellectual tools that we can apply to our game and see if this anticipatory play, even on paper, has a chance to happen. And if you are a more experienced designer, you know those. You know that you need consequences from the player perspective. You know that you need choice, and too much choice is no choice, because cognitive theory, player does not get it. Because, you know, if there's too much choice, we just collapse it and don't see the choices. The diversity in terms of if it's always the same level, we will get bored. But this is a very nice teaching tool. Usually in the first time in the title or student projects, fail at least of 2 or 3 of those in the design part. There are also other parts, right? But this quickly gives us a checklist for them, for our juniors, for even us later on, especially when it gets ingrained and we don't even think about it. Because those things are the first step to get the answer why our players are bored or not engaged. But we are talking not about the sexiness of player fantasy and creating the vision. Those are later stages. So if the player fantasy sucks, then yeah, at least it will be engaging. So the question that you can derive from those things are: what is the main source of anticipatory play? Do player understand the consequences? Can player finish the game in their head? Because this is a problem sometimes with mystery-focused games. In there, my anticipatory play is thinking about, he's a killer. I found new evidence. He's a killer. But if from the first scene I know who's a killer and there's no chance for subverting my expectations, I'm bored. And I'm not gonna play. And relying on those allows us to do it quickly. We have 10 minutes. That's not good. So complex systems. Complex systems is actually not a design thing, but it is. In terms of system, in terms of system design, it mostly relies on the more systemic games on complex systems. Complex systems are systems, of course, the definition between scientists, they are not sure what is enough, but the complex systems have emergent behaviors. So the idea is that we have a set of relations between different components that can generate effects that are not easily predicted by analyzing it. For example, I don't know if you can hear me. For example, the left corner, this is a very simple, systemic kind of set of relations. You've probably seen it in your games many times, that one thing makes another thing go faster, but if the thing goes faster, the first thing goes slower. We can use it, for example, to create a dynamic scaling, once again, an adaptive and dynamic difficulty system. But also, this is a system, like a real life system, that makes a zebra look like a zebra. This is kind of a reaction of diffusion, it is called. But this is a great source of inspiration, and this space is also from where snowball comes. The snowball is a positive feedback loop, and there's a lot more of those. And studying them allows us to create more adaptive, more interesting things in systemic space. But also studying that, that moved, whatever. But also studying that allows us to better communicate clearly between inputs and outputs, between different systems, and actually stopping emergent behaviors from happening, because it is hard to control them. And this is why games like RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress take years, 10 and 20 respectively, to make, because making them parallel, like creating all of those systems at the same time, is very, very difficult. But analyzing those allows us to work in terms of inputs and outputs and boundaries of given systems, to divide our design process between many designers and have a common vocabulary that we will use. So the questions then we can ask ourselves is, what is that dynamic that we want to get? Yeah, because we've got a system put in motion, would give us a given dynamic. And is that system elegant? Is a T.N. Sylvester quote, T.N. Sylvester from his book, the creator of RimWorld, about design, which kind of touches complex systems, also highly recommended. This was a give back in the day, and it made sense to say that this is extraneous cognitive load, but it's not anymore, so you just have to trust me that it was a give. And going further, let's discuss narration. Let's discuss different approaches to narration. Already for the whole 2 days, you heard a lot about from where narration comes and what elements, interact with each other. So here, this is just another reframing of that, discussing that narration in games. When talking about narration, I'm talking about a single playthrough by a given player. It's a sum of dynamic and static elements, where the dynamic elements are an outcome of co-authorship of the player, which makes the decision, and system rhetorics, because every system says something. It was discussed on Arthur's talk, so let's leave it at that. And connecting that with the movie theory of Kuleshov effect about the power of context gives us powerful tools to analyze our games in terms of stories that they tell. And do they tell the stories that we actually want? And also deciding if our story is mostly told through dynamic elements or through static elements has huge implication on the production and budget. So when we know how to articulate that, we can discuss those things and we can make conscious decisions. So here, for example, an aspect that is in the documentation is writing, due to the Kuleshov effect, right? I will just leave it at that, is writing what kind of context is required for the piece of content and what is the context that it leaves. And this way you can analyze everything you have and create rules that won't match things together that shouldn't be there and create a ludonarrative dissonance if you don't want it. But you have to look at those things from this, again, far away, holistic perspective to try to see a different part of the elephant. So, all of those things work in game. But when we collect more of them and more of them, we can look at our games from many sizes. And we don't have enough of lifetime to do it from scratch every time. So relying on those agnostic ways allows us to move the medium forward and not find the wheel, create a wheel, discover a wheel, yeah, for every time from scratch. So, it gives us also context to that. So what now? Because I dropped a lot of words, big and small, and a lot of different theories, and a lot of different approaches, and a pickle. So it's hard to tell what should be the next step. And I would actually, for the more experienced designers, say, do not jump on the first book that you will find, but rather try to analyze your way of thinking. You have experience that allowed you to successfully make games. I'm not talking that a success, but you were able to finish them, and every time, this is a little miracle. So you did something right. Look on your process and try to synthesize it in an agnostic way. So not practices in terms of if climb, then bird shit. No, a broader thing. Try to crystallize your idea of how game works and which perspective works for you. And of course, it would be cool if you would share it on conference so we can share those things, but this is not required. It's for you to give yourself structure. And when you have this structure, write it down and have it on Confluence. This is mostly for leads, for people who have their teams and are the how to say it, the knowledge mentors, right? They make the knowledge decision, not the production decision. There was a nice word for that, it's late. So write those things down. If you walk in terms of a given theory, write it down, push your designers to do further reading in that direction and define a vocabulary. So this way, this easier communication may be a thing. And now, where you all are in the same kind of analytical framework for a given game, it will, go smoother and quicker, and you will have more time on iteration. And when you are beginning, on the beginning of your journey, or like in the middle of your journey, I'm not saying that experienced designers are at the end of the journey, or maybe we are. Okay, so don't jump on everything and everywhere and all at once, because if you try to kind of eat all of the theory that you can find in the same moment, it will once again become a word salad, right? Without context. Pick one that resonates with you. I suggest Brian Upton for the beginners. And walk with it. Finish a project with it. See how it resonates, what worked and what did not. Those are not dogmas. Those are not saint text given us by God from the mountain. There are things that we have to test in fire. There are tools. Not every game needs the hammer, and not every game needs a clove of garlic. And the final step would be to suggest in bigger companies to organize a book club or some place to discuss theories and see what would work for us, why do you agree with it, why you don't agree with it. Because it's easier for more experienced people to even looking on certain use cases to put it on high-level abstractions. But for juniors and specialists, it's not so easy. So when we discuss those things, when we explore those things together, this will grow, and our communication will be easier, and we won't invent the wheel every time from scratch. We invented the wheel, not discovered the wheel. We won't invent everything from scratch. We will move our medium forward, and I hope this is eventually, outside of making money, because we know how it is, this is our goal, to make the best games that we can. Thank you. Thank you.